Hi everyone, this is Nathalie Ellis with ESTEEM Counseling and Consulting Services. So happy New Year to everyone. We are starting 2020 with, for me, lots of focus. Clarity and vision and focus is how I'm wanting to start my 2020. So I'm hoping that everybody is starting 2020 in the direction that they want to see for their life. So happy New Year to everyone. So this is our first Ask a Therapist for the year 2020, and I'm going to do a series for the next 4 weeks, the 4 A's to Radical Self-Love. So before I talk about that, on February 15th, in my office, I'm going to have a workshop. I'm going to have 2 workshops, actually. I'm having 2 workshops, actually, with my clients, and it's open to the public, and the workshops are going to be about radical self-love. And so hopefully some of you all can join me at that workshop, which will be Saturday, February 15th. The teens, I'm going to do a workshop for teens, which will be from 11 to 1, and then another workshop for adults, which will be from, hey Frank, which will be from 2 to 4. Okay, so I'll send out some more information about that. And so to lead into the workshop, I wanted to start talking about radical self-love. All right, and so first let's start with the definition of radical self-love. Okay, but I'm going to break down the definition, and the first word is radical. And according to the dictionary, radical is the adjectives is an adjective and a noun. The adjective of radical is the fundamental nature of something, or advocating for something, or thorough change. Okay? The fundamental nature of something, or advocating for thorough change. And the noun, it's a person who advocates thoroughly. Okay? So radical is a person who advocates thoroughly. That's a noun. Okay? So that's the definition of radical. Self, one's individuality and one's role in life. One's individuality and one's role in life. Okay? And then we have the word love. An intense feeling of deep affection. An intense feeling of deep affection, or a great interest in pleasure in something. A great interest in pleasure in something. And so I wanted to make sure I break down those 3 words. Radical. And so one word for radical is thorough change or advocating. Self is one's individuality or one's role in one's life. And love is an intense feeling of deep affection or a great interest in pleasure in something. So, with all these different definitions of these words, radical, self, and love, my definition of radical self-love is to show interest and affection to yourself thoroughly. Okay? So radical self-love is about showing interest and affection to yourself thoroughly. Okay? And that's important. The radical part is really, really important because, again, when it comes to self-love, we often try to define how we love ourselves based on how other people around us love us or interact with us. Okay? And so, which is why the 4 A's are important. And so the 4 A's: acknowledgement, awareness, acceptance, and achieving radical self-love. And I am going to first talk about today acknowledgement. Okay? And before we could do anything with anything, we first have to acknowledge where we are in this process of radical self-love, where we are in the process of self-love. Or is there self-hate, right? Because again, when we're not showing ourselves love, what are we showing ourselves instead? When we're not lifting ourselves up, what are we doing instead? When we're not talking positively to ourselves and empowering ourselves and lifting ourselves, then what are we doing to ourselves, right? And so first we have to acknowledge where we are in this process. So what are we acknowledging? Again, acknowledging where we are. Unfortunately, a lot of us do struggle with self-worth and self-esteem, right? And when we are struggling with our self-worth and self-esteem, meaning our self-worth is, what is our value? How do we value ourselves? And again, when I do my therapy with a lot of my clients, it's really important that we have to go back, right? We have to go back to our childhood. We have to go back to our parents, how we're raised, all those things, because again, the foundation of who we are, that's the foundation. How we're parented, how our mom and our dads, how they love us, how they care for us, how they take care of us, how they interact with us, how they do things with us. That from those experiences is how we then define who we are, right? Especially before we even have our own thoughts and ideas. So these type of interactions within our homes, within our families, are happening at birth. Shoot, some of it is way before birth, right? But definitely at birth, we're here now, and some of these things are happening. Although we don't have the words as babies, but we are experiencing how people are treating us, how people are loving us. And we then, in turn, use that to define our own love, our own self-love. Okay? So let's first acknowledge that. Where are we in that process? And so with a lot of my clients, I have to kind of go back to, okay, tell me about the relationship with your mom. Tell me about the relationship with your dad, your relationship with your siblings, with family, with your caretakers, with people around you, okay? Based on these relationship, how do you then define yourself, okay? And self-esteem is a lot of that, right? Self-esteem, self-worth is built in a lot of those interactions. And so now here we are, as we get older, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we're becoming more aware, self-aware of who we are, right? But some of those foundation of how we're treated is already kind of embedded, right? If someone tends to call us names, after a while, sometimes we take that on. We take that on, and then we start calling ourselves names. We start, if somebody calls us stupid, we then take that on. And so it's important to then also pay attention to the messages we are telling ourselves, our self-talk, right? Acknowledging that. So we need to know where we are in the process, right? And so let's say the process is, it starts low, and then we're making our way up high to radical self-love, right? And so where are we in this process, right? And it's a process. Right? And what I tell people with everything, there's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as once you've reached this is where it's going to be, and you're never gonna, right? It's a continuous thing, because every day we are challenged, right? But once we have the tools, once we have skills, once we do our work, then that challenge is a little different, right? Versus when we don't have the tools and skills, as we taking on things, the negative interactions that's happening, we then experience it, we take it on as that, versus when we develop tools and skills and we become to acknowledge our own self-worth, our own self-love, we then learn to, that's not my issue. We then turn to acknowledge what's happening around us, how people are treating us, but then we tend to kind of put that back on others, right? And so that's part of the goal too, is to not take on people's perception of us, people's attitude towards us, people's views on us, right? Not to continue to take that on. But as a child, we don't know any different, so we're just kind of taking those things on, and we're defining ourselves based on what's happening around us. And so part of the acknowledgement is to figure out, where are we in this process of radical self-love, and begin to do the work. And so I do challenge everyone to definitely do the work. If you're noticing that the messages that you are telling yourself, the self-talk, is often negative, I'm stupid, I'm no good, something's wrong with me, I'm fat, I'm skinny, nothing I do is ever right, I don't want anybody to get to know me, they don't like who I am. When we can become aware of these messages and where they're at, right? Because again, these messages influence our emotions and then our behaviors as well, right? And also our body, right? Because again, Our bodies is a part of who we are, right? Our body sensations, right? The more we take on negativity, we hold on to it, it starts to impact the body negatively. Headache, stomach ache, gut, our intestines, all these things are impacted. So it's important that we do the work, and it's a whole work. When we talk about mental health, we're talking about physical health, we're talking about spiritual health, we're talking about all of it, because you can't do one without doing the other. We have to do all the work. So again, yes, paying attention and acknowledging what messages you're telling yourself. Okay? Like I said, the self-talk influences. All right? And so, when we talk about how self-talk influences the feelings, then do we carry a lot of shame? Do we carry a lot of guilt? Do we carry a lot of anxiety, negative feelings and emotions that then also weighs us down, right? And then our actions, do we tend to sabotage as a result of that? Do we then sabotage our action? Do we drink too much? Do we engage in risky and high-risk behaviors that tends to hurt us? Do we self-harm? Do we allow people to yell at us, to hurt us? Do we not take care of our health? Do we not take care of ourselves as a result of that? And so the action follows as well, right? So it all works together when it comes to radical self-love. So once we get to that point of acknowledging where we are in all these stages and begin to do the work, then that work will manifest itself in how we see ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, how we act as well. Okay? So the first step is acknowledgement. So where are you in the process of radical self-love? Let me know. Okay? So next week we will talk about awareness. All right? But first I wanted to make sure that we talk about acknowledgement, because we first need to acknowledge where we are in this process. Okay? So let's do that. All right? Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope I answered all the questions. And see you soon.